Talk brought to you this morning by A&A Construction. Joe, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, Todd. Appreciate it.
Our pleasure to have you on. This is, Vernon Law's 95th birthday today.
I didn't know. Today must be March 12th then, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Pirates Cy Young Award winner. There might be another one in the mix this year.
Yeah, well, that's exciting. In fact, there are 2 or 3 guys on that pitching staff that have that sort of ability, and it'd be really fascinating to watch this season unfold. Just from the pitching standpoint, it's interesting that teams get built on pitching, and we've talked about it for so many years and how the Pirates sort of were plugging people in wherever they could find them. Now they're stronger, and they're getting even stronger from the minor leagues, and you get a chance to watch all of these talented young arms coming up, which makes it interesting to me when you throw in a guy like a Bailey Falter who doesn't throw hard, certainly not as hard as some of the others, but still the fastball is a feature for Bailey Falter because he's so deceptive. It's interesting to watch the philosophy of pitching that the Pirates have.
Yeah, there's just not one way to get guys out, and we've seen that through the years. Some of our favorite players do things a little bit differently, and the way that Vern Law was getting guys out, or Bob Friend, or Vinegar Ben Mizell, or whoever. They all did things differently, and so same thing with today's group. Skeens and Jones were both rookies last year. They're both right-handed. They both throw in the upper 90s and touch 100 miles an hour. They're completely different pitchers. And, and that's something that's interesting. Falter may throw 92, but because of the way that the ball rotates off of his fingers, it doesn't drop as much as other people's fastballs. So hitters tend to swing underneath it. And so he can get a swing and miss on an upstairs fastball differently than some other pitchers. The Pirates had a pitcher named Archimedes Caminero, maybe 8-9 years ago. Mm-hmm. Threw 100 miles an hour. It was straight as an arrow, and everybody hit it. And he was out of baseball pretty soon. So it's fascinating how it works. There is there is a good bit of science, especially teams have really poured it. The Pirates are no exception. They spend a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of resources on trying to find out different things, behind the scenes, so to speak, biomechanics and et cetera with pitching. And they've developed a lot of good pitchers. So, and some of it is just like with Skeens, no one had to develop Skeens. He was already like that. Mm-hmm. But the difference between he and Jones is going to try to overpower you with a fastball that has a little bit of the ride like Falter's does. Skeens is going to do it with a combination of the power, but also 5 different or maybe 6 different pitches and location, whereas Jones is still refining his location like most young pitchers do. He was pretty much a 2-pitch pitcher last year. He's going to try to, throw 5 pitches this year and work them in a little bit more equally. So it's fascinating. It is a science, but there is some unexplained stuff that takes place with pitching too. That only the hitters can tell you what they see. And many of them can't explain why they see what they see from a pitcher.
And it's interesting you use that word science because Paul Skeens does seem like a mad scientist out there sometimes. Joe, they talk about the Pirates in their offseason and did they make enough moves and were there enough acquisitions? I think one of the most important acquisitions for the Pirates in this past offseason might be Brent Strom.
I totally agree. I mean, and you don't want to hear that. You want to hear that they acquired 1 or 2 middle-of-the-order hitters. I know what you mean. But it is what it is, what has taken place. But it's going to be interesting to see what his influence is. For instance, so far, he's picked out a few guys that he sees something that he could suggest to make some alterations. But he's also not said some things to many of the pitchers and said, look, right now, just do what you're doing. And so I like that because he's for those who are unfamiliar, that's not a household name. Brent Strom, an ex-major league pitcher, but he pitched to Clemente. That's how long ago he pitched. He has been a pitching coach in the major leagues and a very successful one for decades. And now he's the assistant pitching coach of the Pirates. He's basically there to offer his expertise and collaborate with the pitching group. And for him to come in with all that, all that know-how and not say, I know all this stuff and I'm just going to, feed you it. No, I don't see anything to change here. Go ahead, continue. I do see something here, and let's talk about it, and we'll figure it out. That kind of approach to me speaks more volumes about what kind of coach he is, that he's just trying to help players and try to help individuals be as good as they can be, because that'll help the team, rather than trying to boast what he might know about something. And there are coaches like that, so it's good to know that he's not one of them, that he's just trying to make the team better.
Yeah, and you know what you did to me? You made me go look up Roberto Clemente against Brent Strom.
Yeah. I mean, he's been around a long time. I mean, he's in his mid-70s, but a tremendous track record of success working with, maybe that talented pitcher and taking him from being like a good pitcher, or maybe a little bit underperforming, to a Cy Young Award winner. So yeah. He's really helped a lot of guys, and they really attest to the know-how that he brings. And so the Pirates were, I thought, really smart to bring him on and help the pitching group, maybe even take the next step and bring some of these guys from being, good pitchers or they're good most of the year to being really elite starting pitchers, because the Pirates can have more than just Paul Skeens be an elite starting pitcher, I think.
Yeah. Well, Roberto was 1-for-1 against him. He had a single.
That can be said of many pitchers, I presume. So
yeah. So Brent Strom is an interesting addition to the entire Pirates picture. You put this puzzle together every year and find out what's going on. Hey, what are we hearing about Ke'Bryan Hayes having a little soreness and missing some time? That's not helpful news.
Well, it is, and it isn't. If it's one of those things where, they're looking at it and saying, well, is he going to be ready for the regular season? Yes. Is he going to be ready by Friday? Yes, is what they think right now. So he's not going to miss a lot of time. If you're missing time in spring training, almost always it's because, if you miss a week or a week and a half in spring training, it's almost always because the injury is so minor that they don't want anything to carry over into the regular season. So just let it heal. Whereas guys routinely are playing through, mild to moderate concerns with their bodies all throughout the year, but there's another game to win that night, so they've got to post up and get out there. Well, there isn't a game to win yesterday or today or tomorrow. It's spring training, so why go out there? And you're seeing that with Pham or anybody else. That you get a little dinged up. Hey, just rest. Let your body heal. There's for a hitter too. Talking with Kevin Young on the TV side yesterday, and he said he'd like to get 50 at bats in there. Most hitters really get 30, 30 or more in spring training to feel like they're ready. And if they can get closer to 50, great. But a lot of those at bats come in that final week of spring training. So if you get that, if you work, let's say 4 out of the last 6 games, or 5 out of the last 6, or and you get in and play most of those games and get a bunch of at-bats in, and they could always recreate at-bats for hitters too on the backfields over at Pirate City, then they feel like they're on a roll and ready to go with their timing into the season. So there's no question that, as long as nothing else pops up, that Hayes will be able to do that. In fact, they anticipate him being able to play in spring training games this weekend.
Joe Block of the Pirates with us here this morning. Guys are trying to separate themselves from each other and make this team. Guys like Jack Sawinski, he's having a fairly good spring for him. And, of course, that first base puzzle still to put together. But you're beginning to notice names more and more. One of those names, Billy Cook, looks like he's really solid. Nick York is another one. Who is a really solid name from the fact that they can both play so many different positions in addition to the bat that they bring. But it's really interesting watching all of these guys try to make their name for themselves before Ben Cherington and Derek Shelton.
Yeah, and whoever's on the roster on March 27th, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not going to be a big factor for the team this season. One of the things to recall is, for me, I try to remind myself, there's a lot made because we have all spring training, so we have 5 weeks to talk about who's going to be on the opening day roster. Well, it's just one game. The roster changes so often, even by game 2. of the regular season. We've seen that in many of the years, and so I think that's something to take place. That a lot of these guys that are still remaining, and even some of the ones that were farmed out yesterday, they're gonna be a big factor for this year's Pirates team. So in York's case, he's 22 years old, and really looks like he has a great idea of how to hit. I think no matter where they play him, he's going to be able to be adequate there. And then certainly that bat, it's got even more to come. He's barely scratched the major leagues. Cook's a little older; he's 26, but even in college, he was a utility player. So that's a guy that brings a lot of energy from my perspective. Also has shown that can be a really adequate to above average defender at just about any position out there. So reminds me, at least defensively, a little bit like Sean Rodriguez when the Pirates had him, where you could just plug him in, and maybe he hasn't even worked over there in several years, whatever, but he'll be fine. And so he kind of takes that role a little bit. So as the Pirates build their opening day roster, who do they need? Where do they need to cover which positions? Do you have enough lefty bats, righty bats? And so I think that's how they'll build the bench to start the year, and then obviously things change from there. But both those guys will factor in with the Pirates this year, I do believe.
Yeah, absolutely. So we continue to watch spring training, enjoy it a lot. Boy, Connor Griffin made a heck of a catch last night, didn't he? Holy cow.
Hey, he's 18 years old, playing in Major League spring training games, and he's looking like the most talented player on the field a lot of times.
Jeez. Man, oh, man. I wonder if he has Girl Scout cookies in his background, because today, Joe, is the 113th birthday of the Girl Scouts. So the question is, your favorite Girl Scout cookie?
Thin Mints.
Me too.
Yeah, they're hard to beat. There's a lot of good choices there.
Yeah.
A lot of good choices there. Boy, that's a lot to work through. But yeah, they're always a number one for me. If I'm going to buy one box, and I always buy 14, but if I'm going to buy one, that would be Thin Mint.
Well, the folks at Taste of Home, they put Thin Mints number one. Jake went for Samoas at number two, and so did the folks. Oh, well, he went at number one for Samoas, and Taste of Home picked them number two. But yeah, Girl Scout cookies, it's too good to believe. All right, Joe, have a wonderful day, and maybe go out to the street corner and see if you can find a little girl selling cookies out there today.
Yeah, that sounds great. Well, thanks, Todd. I appreciate it. Talk to you Friday.
Have a great day.
All right, you too.
It is the voice of Indiana County. It's WCCS 101.1 FM, AM 1160, WCCSradio.com. Joe Block, brought to us this morning by A&A Construction.